Good evening. A state of emergency remains in effect tonight in Duncan and in North Cowichan, where flooding has forced hundreds of people out of their homes. The worst flooding in the Cowichan Valley in a generation. Days of heavy rain combined with a high tide this morning to send the Cowichan and Koksilah Rivers over their banks. Now, to get a sense of just how much land has been flooded, you have to take a look at it from the air. Streets and yards and homes are flooded out. Sandbags are holding back the water as well as they can. An evacuation center has been set up at the Cowichan Community Centre. That's where people are huddled tonight, waiting for the water to recede so they can finally go back to their homes. The Cowichan River has peaked at a 7-year high, and the tide will eventually go out later tonight. But for now, North Cowichan, the city of Duncan, and the Cowichan Tribal Lands are under a flood warning and a state of emergency.
For those people that are watching and not able to get back to their homes, extra private and RCMP security will be provided for those homes.
We were a little bit surprised that all of a sudden it started to breach certain areas.
The water levels have been inching their way down this afternoon, but authorities are worried that the water could rise again with more rain in the forecast. There's another system churning offshore, another 20 millimeters of rain on its way. A News Mid-Island Bureau Chief Jonathan Bartlett has spent his day slogging through the Cowichan Valley. He begins our coverage right now, live in Duncan tonight. Jonathan.
Hudson, just to give you an idea of where we are, we're on the shoulder of the Trans-Canada Highway, just north of Duncan, right next to the Somino's Marsh, which is now a Somino's Lake, and the water is creeping up into the slow lane of the Trans-Canada Highway. Now, the speed in which the water rose this morning with the floodwaters surprised a lot of people. From the air, you'd be excused if these scenes reminded you of Hurricane Katrina. This area of Duncan, Beverly Street to Lakes Road, Trunk Road to Campbell Street, and everything in between, flooded when the Cowichan and Koksilah Rivers spilled their banks early this morning. 300 homes have been evacuated, 2 schools surrounded by water and closed.
I've been here 20 years. It's never been like this, ever.
From the ground, the streets are choked with dirty water and debris, cars with water up to their windshields. The rising water was an unpleasant surprise to people who live here.
At 6 o'clock this morning, the wife was up and didn't see this. So this happened, it really just boom.
This morning at about 8:15, there was a knock on the door from Cowichan Search and Rescue that said, hey, you got to leave immediately. This is an evacuation order.
First thing we grabbed, of course, was our son's hockey gear, because we just bought him new goalie pads and that yesterday.
By mid-morning, high tide is only making matters worse. I'm standing on a dike that I'm told is about 30 years old. And as you can see, the water on this side is a lot higher. If this dike lets go, the flooding could be a lot worse.
My parents bought here in 1957, and in December of '61, I woke up Sunday morning to this whole area flooded. The water would probably come up 2 feet in one night, and we didn't have the dike at that time or the road raised or any pumping systems, and this whole area we were at least a week underwater.
It's been really good since they put up that dike, but it's just too much rain, and with the high tides coming in, it just doesn't look good here.
The 2 schools along Beverly Street, Alexander Elementary and Cowichan Middle School, look worse than they are. Water is in the crawl spaces and up to the floor joists. The decision was made early this morning to close.
The plan is to monitor it. If we have any issues, we're hoping that it drops enough that we can get in and dry it out and have school Monday morning.
Meantime, the school parking lot is being used to fill sandbags to protect area homes. For the people whose homes have been damaged by this flood, it's time to wait for the water to recede and hope their insurance covers the damage. And a lot of people we talked to today are very worried whether insurance will cover the damage of their homes. And as you saw in my report, a lot of water is creeping into the homes. We couldn't get inside any of the houses today, but you can see there's going to be a lot of damage. And 300 houses evacuated. There's going to be a lot of people worried about the contents of their home. And as you can see, it's still raining. We haven't seen the water rising behind us here into the lanes. It's been like this most of the day, but the rain is pretty heavy like it was last night. So a lot of people are worried that this is not the end of the flooding in the Cowichan Valley. Hudson?
Now, not far from where you are, Jonathan, and we, anyone on the island has been through that stretch of Duncan many times, past the Somino's Marsh. To the south of you is the Beverly Corners area, and that's where really the worst damage is that we saw in your report. Not far from there is the Cowichan Community Centre under the big stick where the evacuees have huddled tonight. What's happening with them?
Well, what's happening with them is they're at 4 o'clock. There was a meeting. They're meeting with the emergency program people, with police, with Cowichan tribes are there, and they're going over what's happening next, where those people will be sleeping tonight, what will happen to their homes once the water recedes.
Now, we are expecting that there will be further heavy rain. We're seeing that it's happening where you are right now, although when the tide goes down, that should alleviate the situation somewhat, or do they know yet how far the water may go down?
They don't know when and how much the water will go down and what speed it'll recede, but it has gone down a little bit since we were there in mid-morning, and obviously rises and falls with the tides. I'm not even sure when high tide is.
Can we maybe get Jason just to pan off to your left and have a look at how's the traffic situation through Duncan tonight? I know you were slowed down trying to get to and from Duncan this afternoon.
There was, it's slow. There's a lot of, people have to be very careful. There's a lot of water on the road. There's the, of course, when that layer of water goes on the road, it can get you out of control. If you don't slow down, it's creeping through Duncan right now. And north of Duncan, there was a minor traffic accident tonight where someone probably, I don't know, I'm assuming, lost control because of the water on the road, hydroplaning.
Other than that, though, we're not aware of any casualties as a result of the flooding.
No casualties heard of yet, no.
All right, Jonathan, we'll let you get in and get dry and check back with you later at 6 and 6:30. Thank you.
Thanks, Hudson.
Jonathan Bartlett reporting live. Now, the heavy rain that came down last night did end overnight, but the light rainfall continued until about 3 o'clock this morning. The Massachi Lake Weather Station recorded more than 156 millimeters of rain over the past 48 hours. And then at about 9 this morning came the high tide at Cowichan Bay, and that's when the rivers burst their banks. Emergency authorities in Duncan admit that they were surprised by the flooding and the extent of it as the waters rose above those levees that have held these rivers back for decades. A News reporter Andrew Johnson is also in Duncan tonight. He joins us live with more on that. Andrew.
Hudson, every indication being monitored by officials here in the Cowichan Valley over the past few days during this heavy rain that's hit the island over the past week showed them the existing dike stopgap measures that have been in place on the floodplain for years, as you mentioned, should hold. But that all took a dramatic turn for the worse this morning. Surrounded by a meter of water, landlord Tim Ryan helps his tenants in 2 homes on Beverly Street salvage anything they can.
Went and got the U-Haul and to get the stuff out as fast as possible, and just in case something. I mean, we did block it up this morning. We got here initially and blocked everything up to keep it out of the water and tried to salvage as much as possible. And he thought, well, it's got to be moved out, so I may as well just get a U-Haul now and just move it now and put it into storage.
Blocks away from the neighborhood that now resembles a scene out of a disaster movie, emergency response officials grapple with a situation that worsened almost minute by minute early this morning. Officials say they were monitoring rising water levels over the past few days in the area, but were caught off guard this morning by a perfect storm.
We were informed by Environment Canada that we've had substantially more precipitation than normal events. This combined with a very, very high tide situation is what's culminated into this.
We've had high rain events before, and there's certain areas that we know that we watch, and very often we'll see water come to a certain level and then kind of hold there and not go any further. And this particular time, I think we were a little bit surprised that all of a sudden it started to breach certain areas.
Now, as hundreds of volunteers bag sand and man pumps and many more wonder what will be left of their belongings, emergency response workers plot their next move. For those who will not be able to return to their homes tonight, RCMP will patrol the flooded streets to keep looters out.
For those people that are watching and not able to get back to their homes, they should know that extra private and RCMP security will be provided for those homes.
Now, Hudson, as Jonathan mentioned, emergency workers are meeting with homeowners right now to determine who, if anyone, can return to their homes tonight, depending on the damage to individual homes. And then it's pretty much a tense waiting game for everyone as we march toward the next high tide, which should be about 9:30 tomorrow morning. Now, you mentioned 20 millimeters of rain is in the forecast, but just purely judging from what we're seeing tonight, it's certainly coming down heavily. So as we approach the early hours of the morning, emergency teams will be able to better gauge what exactly the situation is, but they were saying they are cautiously optimistic that the worst may be over, but there are a lot of mays and a lot of cautiously typed terms being used right now.
All right, Andrew, thank you. We will let you get back to gathering more for us and check back with you at 6.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Stay with A News for full coverage of the Duncan disaster tonight.